Hey y'all, Norman's in the shop and I got a list of things to do. Big one, injectors. I've got to get Norman to stop smoking. Along with the injectors, I'm going to do glow plugs and the injector cups. Make sure they're good and sealed in the heads with red Loctite around the little stems. I have a fuel leak somewhere in the valley between the heads. I'm not so sure where. So I'm gonna pull the cab and pull all these top accessories and wiring and everything off. And I'm just gonna inspect the entire fuel system. I've got my lift pump that I can energize and then just look around and see if I can figure anything out. I have no fuel gauge. So I don't know if it's the sending unit or the gauge on the dash. I'll look around and see if I can figure that out. I drove close to 1,000 miles last fall with no fuel gauge, and even with the 29-gallon transfer tank, that is nerve-wracking. I've got some real truck lights, I call them, the cab lights. I've had them for like 2 years, and if I can find them all, I'll stick them on. Because of the roof thing to the deflector, air dam, the straps on the doors let water come in on heavy rainstorms. So I'm gonna see what I can do to make a deflector shield or something to make those seal better. I know I'm gonna need tires this year, so I'm gonna keep that on the list of things to do. And my batteries, Norman's been cranking pretty slow lately, so I'm gonna charge them up while it's in the shop and then have them load checked, and we'll see how that goes. Then we'll fire it up after everything's done and put back together, run it good, and then give it an oil change. I want to give the oil change last because it does have fresh oil in it, but just anytime I open up an engine, I like to do an oil change after it's all put back together. So that's going to be important. I guess we'll see if I can find anything else to do along the way. It's almost May, and I need to be able to have this for Memorial Weekend. So I've got a month, but there's also other things to do around the house and in the shop. So we'll see if I get all this done. All right, I've added a few things to the list. We'll see how far I get and in a timely manner. I did mention that I'm going to pull the cab to do this job. You don't have to. I do realize that. There's no absolute need to pull the cab, but back there, the valve covers are very close to the firewall, and it's just a thing for me. It's easier in my mind to pull the cab off. This is a clean body, so I can just zip it all apart real quick. But if you want to screw around with all the tight corners and everything else, you can do this job without pulling the heads, or without pulling the cab, sorry. But you know what? I'd just rather do it that way. Okay. If you can see right where the flashlight's pointing to or shining to, you can see a little red drip, and that's the power steering leaking. So the charge line from the pump to the hydro boost is my culprit. I might end up just replacing them all because it's time, but I did find it. That's a good thing. You can also see a banjo bolt down there on one of the fuel lines, and that is quite wet. So I'm hoping that's my leak source for the fuel in the valley of the engine as well. But I'm just gonna keep taking things apart a little bit at a time, looking for any drips, looking for the high spot of the wet areas. And that normally, you know, oil can creep a little ways, but normally when it's at its highest point, that's kind of where it's leaking. So same thing with the fuel for the diesel. Well, I ran uptown and got a little trim. Don't tell my wife, she hasn't seen it yet. But I got my gloves on, ready to get back to work. I made myself a little to-do list, and all I got left is body mounts. But let me show you the parking brake cable. I like to separate the cable right behind the, or basically underneath the driver's door. And how I do that is I pull down on this cable and it pulls the cable back, and it also pulls the cable forward. And then I just grab it with some vice grips and clamp, and then up here do the same thing right here by the body mount tab, and just clamp that cable so it has slack. And then I grip this cable solid with some vice grips, and then I'll use pliers with like a hole in it and just tap here, and it just pops this loose. If that were to be stuck, I'd try it on that side, but just one or the other comes loose. It's just a swedge fitting, and then the cable's out right there. So all I've got left to do is just zip those body mount bolts out, and I should be able to lift up the cab. Okay, I'm down to the valve covers pretty much. I've got to pull a few things off, but now I'm just right there. I've got a whole workstation. I don't have to worry about AC. I don't have to worry about the body. All that stuff's out of the way. And maybe I could have done it like without the body in place, but this just gives me the chance to inspect more things before I need the truck, and that's good. Like I say, I still need to get down and see if I can find the fuel leak. I believe it's that banjo bolt fuel line right there, but I'd like to just get all that wiring out of the way and verify that. I'm also just going to go ahead and order all new lines for the power steering because it's all here. They're really not that much money, and this will keep me on the road and out of the ditch.